Good morning, everyone. Welcome to order the California Housing Finance Agency Board of Directors. I want to welcome to the board and Jacqueline Huang over here, who is in for the first time for the Department of Finance. So welcome you being here. Anybody got an orientation or high-tech equipment here about what to do or not? Good. Okay, so just the main thing is to push that little button that says mic when you want to talk, and if it's you can be heard. Would like the secretary to call the roll, please.
Ms. Avila,
Here.
Mr. Schaefer for Mr. Chung.
We have a quorum. Thank you very much. Our next item is the approval of the minutes of November 2nd, 2016. We have a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second. So would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Avila, here. Mr. Schaefer for Mr. Chung.
Yes.
Ms. Gallagher? Yes. Ms. Gunn?
Yes.
Mr. Gunning?
Yes.
Mr. Hunter?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson Hall? Mr. Metcalf?
Abstain.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Ms. Sotelo?
Yes.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Ms. Falk?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you. Item number 3 is the executive director comments.
Good morning and happy New Year to boards and members of the public. I'd like to do a report out on 3 items. As you know, the governor released his January 10th budget, and I will defer to HCB to present some of that information during their statewide housing assessment report out. But he basically laid out a framework for which he wanted to any funding for housing to be consistent with. I also want to report out on an upcoming trip to Oregon to meet with the Western Housing Finance Agencies. We're going to be doing that. Tony and I will be traveling to Oregon to meet with the Oregon Housing Finance Agency to discuss multifamily and single-family housing programs. That will be January 19th and 20th. And then the upcoming legislative conference with the National Council of State Housing Agency is going to be in Washington, D.C., March 6th through 8th. We have 5 CalHFA staffers traveling and potentially 2 board members traveling to that trip to DC for the National Legislative Conference. I also want to report out on our partnership with local government for the preservation of gap financing, which is consistent with our 16-17 business plan goal to collaborate with other housing entities to deliver effective and efficient housing solutions. We have been in ongoing conversations with some of the local jurisdictions about a preservation program, a local demonstration type project in which we would marry our gap financing with their gap financing and our conduit issuance and our flex lender program. I'll let Tony speak a little bit about that during his presentation, but that is going well and it is on track, and we hope to see that partnership come to fruition very soon. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay, item number 4 is a report on the Housing and Community Development's 2025 statewide housing assessment. And so I'd like to turn this over to them now.
Thank you and good morning. I'm going to give just a little bit of some opening observations and then turn it over to go through the PowerPoint pulled together that staff will walk you through. But I thought it might be helpful just to make a couple of observations. One is just to acknowledge that this statewide housing assessment has been a remarkable amount of work to pull together. And I first started going on this project maybe 2 years ago. It's been quite a while in the making. I also want to acknowledge that although HCD is the lead for this, and it was our team who sort of primary authorship on it, it was a project that was inherently exceptionally collaborative in terms of engaging very closely with the staff of CalHFA, with the other housing agencies, treasurer's office, and a whole range of stakeholders internally across the administration to get to a place where we were able to release a draft for public comment 2 weeks ago today. Second of all, it's worth just noting the connective tissue here between the release of this report and the governor's budget proposal last Tuesday. And by that, I mean the report has in many ways, was used in many ways by the governor, by the administration as a launching pad and as a framework to better talk about both the extent and scope of the housing crisis and to offer up a framework for responding for it in the governor's budget statement last Tuesday. If you look at the 8 pages of the governor's budget last Tuesday, you will see in there a common language with what you're going to hear in the presentation this afternoon in terms of what the problem is that needs to be solved, as well as a set of principles that talk about what it is the work that the governor is asking the legislature to do on housing this session to bring forward a housing package and to express his commitment to work with the legislature on a housing package. And so I think it's helpful to understand the statewide housing assessment and to think about the governor's budget statement also in that context. The key thing, as I think about it, in terms of the governor's budget statement, that is helpful to reflect on a little bit is his continued desire to really focus on a housing solution that goes beyond modest or any, goes beyond, I guess, dollars and into really thinking about systemic issues that are causing the marketplace in California to be unable to meet the basic demand that we face. And his budget statement lays out in the principles a number of observations that are picked up, that will be picked up by the team as we get to the presentation. Things like the fact that per unit costs of construction in California have gone up at a rate that's far in excess of what the average or median household can afford to pay. The fact that we see significant delays in permitting and processing times for local jurisdictions in terms of being able to actually bring product to the market. The fact that we see that local jurisdictions in many cases don't have good incentives or adequate or robust enough incentives to be able to want to bring the housing that may be in the best interest of the region or the state. And the notion as well that maybe we need to be looking at housing not just on its own, but even more integrated in with transportation and other infrastructure related investments in terms of where those dollars might or might not flow. This budget is a little bit different than what we saw in May revised. You guys will recall back in May, the governor made a similar statement. In that case, he did put forward a very specific legislative proposal, by right proposal. Here, that is not picked up on again. And in fact, what he is saying is functionally like, it's really on the legislature to do the work. And in fact, there was a question at the press conference last Tuesday by a reporter who said, what's the difference here between the by right last session and what we're doing here? And part of it is, he's saying, we got some criticism of the governor's office that we weren't collaborative enough in terms of how that proposal got done. This time we're going to be collaborative, which he's saying, the legislature needs to really take the ball and run forward in this section to develop proposals that get to the same or similar kinds of consequences that we saw in that conversation. But there are other options that can be employed as well. So I think we have here both an opening and request by the governor for the legislature to do some of this work, a commitment by the governor to support the legislature in doing this work. And we also see, for the first time in the budget proposal, really sort of an acknowledgement that any housing package that gets put together this session would also include a permanent off-budget, non-general fund revenue source for affordable housing, which is sort of a first for the governor. This is an idea that's been around for many, many, many years in California, but now, as part of the governor's budget, I think has much more clearly has a sense signal that this is part of what he sees as part of the package that comes together in this session. So, any questions from the board on that? Should we jump right in? So, I'll introduce Lisa Bates and Megan Kirkby, who are going to walk you through the actual report. You have a copy in front of you as well, but you guys will not be shy in terms of letting them know what's on your mind.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Bates. I'm the Deputy Director of the Housing Policy Division at HCD. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to share the draft statewide housing assessment, California's housing future, challenges, and opportunities. As Director Ben mentioned, the assessment has been several years in the making, and I think I'm trying to figure out how to make sure I project here. And I believe I was here exactly a year ago presenting some preliminary information regarding the assessment. We've intentionally released the document in draft form as we view this as a starting point and a context setting for critical housing conversations that do need to happen this year and for years to come. That being said, the document is also a forward-looking document, and it is intended to be looking over the next 10 years. We're hopeful that over the next few months we can have a very robust and engaging.
Excuse me for a second. Madam Chair, can we kind of take a little time out and figure out the situation with the...
Yeah, we set feedback here and delay.
I'm sorry. I don't think it's you. I think it's the system.
Yeah, it's the house mics, and we've called them to look at it. They're supposed to be looking at it in the back somewhere. So they are working on it, but should I just try and shout? That's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
if we maybe just cut the mics and just talk louder, and that would probably actually be easier to understand everyone. So we'll let you know if they come back to us and let us know what the issue is.
So, as I was mentioning, the document was put out in draft because we really want to have a very robust stakeholder engagement and community involvement in shaping the final document. That being said, we are hosting a series of public workshops over the next few months. Use in the years to come. I also would like to echo our appreciation and thanks to Executive Director Tia Boatman and her staff for the excellent contributions that they have made to this document. Not only in the content, but in the design and the layout, the assistance from the CalHFA design and communication staff, and I would particularly like to thank Carr, who's in the audience, for his thoughtful policy insights and who continues to make significant contributions and suggestions as we are moving forward. As Director Metcalf mentioned, not surprising or new to many of you, the assessment does identify the critical housing challenges that California is facing, including low supply of homes compared to the demand, housing being built further away from job centers and transportation options, more families increasingly not able to afford housing, and home ownership rates the lowest since the 1940s. Megan Kirkby, who is one of the three principal authors of the report, will be providing you a brief overview of the assessment. And as you're listening to this and the challenges will appear daunting, we are making progress and we can continue to take steps to course correct. Just as a reflection on the last year's budget, we saw the creation of the No Place Like Home program, which authorized $2 billion to fund permanent supportive housing for Californians experiencing homelessness with mental illness, and we're in the process of actually going out throughout the state talking about a framing paper that has been released, and so We're experiencing a lot of feedback and information as we develop that program. Also, this last November election, we saw 5 jurisdictions across the state approve $2.7 billion in local funding to house homeless and support construction of affordable housing. The 2016 budget also included $150 million of funding to fund homeless programs such as the California Emergency Solutions Grant Program. And we saw many bills that hopefully will make it easier to create new housing, primarily through the accessory dwelling unit legislation, and this is another good step forward in helping to increase our housing supply. What I would like to do now is to turn the presentation over to Megan, and she's going to provide a brief overview of the assessment, and then we can get into a discussion about the document and answer any clarifying questions you may have. So, turn it over to Megan.
Great, thanks everyone. I'm Megan Kirkby. I'll also try and project without the mics. First off, what is a statewide housing assessment? This is a statutorily required document where we are asked to provide an overview of the state of housing in California, as well as the housing related needs for California with a 10-year forward-looking horizon. We're also required to offer options to address. I should do something? Go to my left. Oh. Apologies. We also offer options to address California's housing needs and challenges, specifically with attention to the lower income households and our vulnerable populations. We want this to be a guide and a reference tool for housing practitioners, policymakers, affordable housing advocates, and academia. This is our first comprehensive statewide housing assessment since the Raising the Roof report in May 2000. But at least as Lisa and Ben said, by no means do we expect this to be final. We want to take those next 2 months and really improve the content as well as the options we have to address California's housing challenges. When we look at the projected housing need for California, by working with Department of Finance, HCD provides a projection that 180,000 units are needed annually, or 1.8 million over the next 10 years from 2015 to 2025, just to meet the household growth that's expected for California. On the right side of your graph, you can see our production from the last 10 years, from 2006 to 2015. We've been averaging less than 80,000 units a year, far below that projected need, but that hasn't always been the case. Before 1990, yes, there were peaks and valleys, but we were producing an average of over 200,000 units a year, a lot more of that multifamily than we've seen in more recent years. When you look at that by region, in the 2003 to 2014 fourth housing element planning cycle, only 47% of the planned growth was actually built, and there were shortfalls in every single region. This was a particularly stark time since the recession overlapped with a lot of this planning period, but it is still a substantial gap between what is planned and what actually gets built. We know, and you can read more about this in the report, but many Californians are living in areas that are characterized by low investment, social and economic problems, lack of infrastructure, and long distances from jobs, transportation, high-performing schools, hospitals, and other services. We look at one of those aspects here. This shows by county the jobs per capita on the left side, and on the right side you see that fourth housing element cycle production from 2003 to 2014 where the housing was actually built. There is a mismatch, and while we do need additional production overall in every region of the state, we especially need to see more in the state's high-cost, job-rich communities. And you'll also see in the report that we recognize that significant community development and infrastructure investment is needed to increase opportunity in California's disadvantaged communities. We know that when households are paying high housing costs as a percentage of their income, that they're likely to be making significant sacrifices in other areas of their budget towards transportation, healthcare, medicine, food, saving for a down payment or retirement, or just simply saving for emergencies. We use a term called rent burden. That means a renter household is paying more than 30% of their income towards rent. In other words, we say that they are no longer paying an affordable rent. Severe rent burden is when a household is paying more than 50% of their income toward rent. In California, 54% of all renters are paying more than 30% of their income toward rent. And 30% overall are severely rent burdened, paying more than 50% of their income towards rent. But this is particularly severe for the lower income renters, with 80% of extremely low income households paying more than 50% of their income towards rent. When we look at the rental stock, we can see part of what drives this burden. We have very few rental units affordable to extremely low and very low income households in comparison to the number of households in that income range. In addition, many low and moderate income households also have trouble renting a home at affordable levels, as there are shortfalls in every single income bracket except above moderate renters. One of the ways that we help meet housing needs for the lowest income households is through federal programs. However, federal resources that have been allocated to California have declined significantly in recent years. This graph shows the funding for the Home and Community Development Block Grant allocations from 2003 to 2015, adjusted for inflation. In 2015, both programs received more than half what they were receiving in 2003 for California. High housing costs do not just affect the individual families, but have consequences for society as well. In terms of economic output, a recent study out of Berkeley estimated that squandered building opportunities add up to a national loss of $1.5 trillion every year. And in California alone, these estimates suggest $238 billion are lost annually. Another example is the consequences for economic mobility. Children that grow up in concentrated areas of poverty are impacted in their ability to access the middle class later in life. When housing costs push people further from jobs, longer commutes affect their own quality of life and family transportation costs significantly, but they also increase pollution for the state. In terms of education, when children experience housing instability, they are proven to experience reduced academic outcomes, especially for children in families experiencing homelessness. In all of these areas, housing policy can not only improve the outcomes for the families, but also lead to better outcomes for society as a whole. So we just went over a lot of challenges in the report, and there are so many more if you get a chance to look through the full document we've provided. But we also wanted to cover today a few of the broad categories of options that we've presented to address California's housing challenges. This is an area in particular where we're going to be spending a lot of our public engagement time. We want the best minds in the world thinking about additional steps that are going to help address the housing crisis. Our first broad category is reforming land use policies to advance affordability, sustainability, and equity. Our first option is increase the supply of housing affordable to all income levels by reducing time and cost of development. An example of this is by streamlining permitting or strengthening existing regulatory and entitlement tools, such as density bonus law, the Housing Accountability Act, and the Mitigation Fee Act. The second option we recognize is linking housing production and other housing goals to incentives and investments. For example, providing infrastructure or other non-housing benefits as a reward for jurisdictions that are producing housing. And other rewards for jurisdictions that are doing the hard work to set aside new funds for housing through tools such as affordable housing beneficiary districts, enhanced infrastructure financing districts, local sales tax increases, and bonds, as Lisa mentioned, that were passed in the last election. The third option that we recognize is encouraging land use policies and investment that support community development. One of our suggestions here is to continue to improve our existing tracking of the housing element process and other housing programs, and using that data analysis to measure progress in key areas, such as providing information on housing production in comparison to need, and implementation of the programs that jurisdictions promise to do within their housing element. Our second broad category is addressing housing and access needs for vulnerable populations through greater interagency coordination, program design, and evaluation. The first option is to increase coordination between federal, state, and local health, social services, and housing systems. For example, assisting local entities in developing coordinated entry systems that prioritize housing for the hardest to serve. The second option is investing in permanent supportive housing and ensuring consistent evaluation of programs, including requiring outcomes reporting that identifies barriers and then targets technical assistance to communities based on their identified barriers. Our final category is investing in affordable home development and rehabilitation, rental and home ownership assistance, and community development. The first option is to identify an ongoing source of funding for affordable housing that does not add costs to the state's general fund. This funding should address a range of needs in rural, suburban, and urban areas, as well as promote fair housing principles. Our second option in this category is to encourage continued federal support, including continuing to incentivize the federal 4% tax credit to help bring additional resources to California. Our third option is to increase program data collection and evaluation to reduce costs and improve programs. For example, by improving program data tracking and analysis, as well as researching opportunities to reduce complications, costs, and time, we can help maximize the state's investment through our housing programs. Which brings me to our timeline moving forward for our next 2 months. Our public comment deadline is going to be March 4th, 2017. We're asking people to submit comments through our website or through our sha@hcd.ca.gov email address. We have 6 upcoming public workshops, with our first in San Diego next Monday. All of our public workshops are scheduled at this point, and RSVPs can be done through our website. Following our public comment period, our expectation is that we will compile everything that we've heard over the 2 months from the engagements in the public workshops, as well as the written comments that we received, to decide how to update the statewide housing assessment and provide a final by summer 2017. A lot of information about the statewide housing assessment, as well as an electronic copy, can be found on our website, and that's also where we'd ask you to RSVP for the public workshops. So at this point, we'll open up the discussion that Lisa and Ben mentioned.
Any questions? Yes.
I actually have comments, so
Mr. Russell.
after questions.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Well, first, and are we using the mics or not?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm going to give this a shot here. First, I want to say that the phrase that stuck in my ear, drop-ridge communities, I think is a really useful phrase. I think I heard that it describes as communities that are pulling up the drop ridge and not allowing housing. So we talk about places like Encinitas.
There's a term, I've been looking for a term that is not too much in there.
You turn it off? Okay. Are we on the wrong?
Okay. Then I'll talk louder. So I like having a term to use that is not as confrontational, but still very accurate. A few comments on this in general. Of course, the impact fees we talk about, which really equals infrastructure. And I think we need to get serious about the role of infrastructure in supporting housing, because classically it's a huge burden in the communities I work with, that impact fees can be $20,000 plus per unit. Typically. And these are in low-income neighborhoods without infrastructure. So we need to talk about how we solve that. And the transportation and housing coordination that COGs are supposed to do is a strange charge, because they don't really have any tools or mandates to really tie it back to the housing. They do the RENA numbers, they do the regional plans. They don't really have an effective role in actually allocating these funds, I think. I don't have a state mandate. Something needs to be strengthened so that they are more closely tying that infrastructure dollars and housing production. And I don't know what that is, but maybe some ideas can come out of this process. Land banking is also a key issue. Are there ways that we can bank lands? Especially, I mean, at a time like this, we're going through a period of temporary turmoil in tax credits, for instance. deals, if they could hold on to the land, could wait out a cycle and wait for more stability in this. But we're subject to the vicissitudes of the market right now because there aren't really large land banking opportunities anymore as it used to exist with redevelopment. So maybe that is something we could be looking at as ways of making that more possible. Surplus Lands Act is another thing I think we should be looking at. We have an agency, MTS in San Diego, that has restrictive policies on the reuse of their land. And why are they not subject to almost something like RENA to show that they have the capacity to produce on this land and have to have policies that encourage it, not merely allow, not just permissive, and not just if they do a transaction, they have to make it available for affordable housing, but actually push them in that direction, because that's something that we have a huge stock in the San Diego region of land that is completely unused. So that's something I think we should be looking at. And maybe stronger linkages between some of the TOD efforts that are going on in the AHSC, the cap and trade dollars, because there isn't a complete concurrence between where natural TOD is going to occur and where areas that are actually eligible for the cap and trade dollars. And given the increased importance of that revenue stream to housing production, it'd be nice if we could maybe see some more alignment there. And I could go on all day, it's my favorite topic, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Did you want to comment? Or respond in any way? Yeah. Okay.
Duly noted. I have a more general comment. I want to just thank you for putting up with my edits to this and the agency's edits and the governor's office's edits to this. And I think the final product is a meaningful product. I think it's comprehensive. It's well thought out. So thank you and your staff for really, because this was a lot of work. And I just want to express my appreciation on the record to you for putting this out. Thank you.
Thank you. I also want to express my thanks for this document. These are very complicated documents, not only locally, but when you're doing it at the state level. Just more observation, from the helicopter view back down to the local level. And in particular, a county such as myself, where I come from, Contra Costa County, that we really, a lot of counties need help in that nonprofit developers to come out there to really move forward some of these agendas and policy making, created at the state level. Even locally, city leadership needs to be further developed in really understanding affordable housing and how it ties into their land use planning and the housing element. I know we always talk about it, it's very complicated, but there just isn't the teeth needed locally, and it starts locally to be able to fulfill this demand that's so needed throughout the state. Another example also you highlighted here in the staff report with the CDBG, a county such as Contra Costa, 19 cities, one of our biggest cities, being conquered of 130,000 population in the CDBG. They're one of the 3 CDBG entitlement cities, and they only get $800,000. So, at the federal level, locally, there just isn't the money there, as we all know, that we need to incentivize it through trying to bring that leadership of trying to foster more affordable housing developers to come into communities such as the suburbs, because we have a huge migration from San Francisco and Oakland residents moving out to our area, impacting and then, as we know, the freeways, the whole transportation. So again, trying to bring it more at the local level and trying to foster more of that education on the non-housing people, the practitioners that aren't out there really knowing the subject and how to help them. So if there's dialogue of really trying to figure that out as this report, evolves. And then I also noticed the meetings. We need to get, we have a Fresno, we have a San Francisco, and as Janet can attest, we're very different once you get past the tunnel. So I would encourage possibly a public meeting in the Far East Bay, which is just a different animal in the Bay Area as well. So.
Ms. Sotelo?
So I have a couple of questions and then maybe some comments. Ben, again, thank you and for your leadership and your team, very articulate around housing policy issues, which I appreciate. The presentation didn't really go into home ownership and home ownership activities. And as you know, there's real interface with CalHFA and what we're doing with home ownership. So maybe if you could just speak to that for a moment, and then I have a couple of other questions.
Absolutely. So I didn't prepare slides on this, but we have a variety of homeownership statistics in the report that I think are really jarring and important. One of them, that our homeownership rate is the lowest recorded since the 1940s census. We also share in the report not only the homeownership rates over time, but our homeownership rate compared to other states, we continue to be basically the lowest state in terms of home ownership, with Hawaii and New York. We also recognize home ownerships vary a lot by race and ethnicity. So we share the current home ownership statistics across the census collected spectrum of race and ethnicity. And then home sale prices is another thing where we have the point in time of our most recent home sale prices. I'm forgetting what the number is off the top of my head, but in the not only the median price currently for home ownership, but what the California Association of Realtors recognizes as the income you need to make to afford the median home price, and then the how those prices have changed over time. Clearly the Great Recession had a huge impact on home ownership, and we do try to also recognize that shift that really happened between home ownership to purchasing of homes to turn them into rental properties following that, and there has not been a return to the same home ownership rate level after that.
Just one additional comment is, and I think Peter alluded to it, there's a lot of information that we have that didn't necessarily end up in this document, but we appreciate that feedback. So as we are developing the final version, we can then be adding back in, where folks feel that we're lacking in terms of some of our data. And I know some of your CalHFA staff has already been talking to us about how they'd like to see some more of the home ownership information built out a little bit further. And that being said, there's other areas where we know we want to go deeper into the analysis, and just for sake of being able to get the conversation going and get this document out, we didn't get to that level, but we fully intend to have additional pieces that add on to this as we move forward.
Yeah, and I think it is so comprehensive, and it's difficult to hit all areas. I just think that as a sister agency, we'd like to get that information so that we could actually kind of have our own conversation around what programmatic and financial programs we could put together to help out and to kind of identify what the crisis is, look at what we can do to mitigate it, and roll out programs that are hopefully responsive to it. So that leads me to my second question in terms of just programmatically, like what do we do as a sister body to help either get the word out or to respond to this, or to more formally create a connection to the solutions around the report as opposed to just identifying the problems. How do we play that out?
Thank you, Board Member Sotelo. We will be working very closely with HCD. We have staff that will be participating in the working groups and the public discussion. We will be providing public comment as well to the statewide housing plan. I know some areas specifically related to the home ownership there was data showing that in certain areas of California, it may actually indeed be cheaper to buy than rent. And so we want to be able to make sure that we flesh out some of that data, and we're able to comment back to HCD on that. We're also looking for some statistics on first-time home buyer. As you are very well aware, in the 13-14 year, I think we did 50 loans. And in the 15-16 year, we did over 4,000 loans. And the rate of which we're using our down payment assistance is steadily dwindling. And so what is CalHFA's role in that first-time home buyer space. We'd like to be able to flush some of that information out. And so we, like I said, we will be continuing to work with HCD. We will be providing written comments, and we will be participating in the working group. And then having this as a forum for them to also come and present, we'll continue to make that available too, so that we can continue with this dialogue.
And then my last comment is maybe a little bit more of a structural comment. Given that the governor's perspective around affordable housing really has to deal with the costs associated with building housing, one of the areas that I think is important to take a look at is the construction industry, and to understand the costs associated with construction that we as public agencies may not necessarily understand so readily. And so I think that part of the dialogue, the public workshop dialogue, needs to be with contractors and potentially subcontractors, not just developers, either on the for-profit or the nonprofit side. So I think that as staff, it is difficult for you to make those introductions or interface at that level. So maybe we need to figure out how we can involve the Department of Labor or some other state agency that has more direct connection and correlation to contractors to have that dialogue. Just because I think that there is an opportunity, and one of the things in Los Angeles that we've been talking about is on the supply side, trying to figure out a way that local government can purchase supplies on behalf of affordable housing developers, so that you kind of take off, a huge markup that happens between the subcontractors, the contractors, the developers, and then the actual production of housing, as a way to kind of mitigate any increases to construction cost, such as lumber or some of the more fundamental trades. So I think that there's ideas that are blistering out there in the local jurisdictions that may not come up to Sacramento, but if there's an opportunity to try to understand why costs are the way they are and hit them at the source, then I think it would be a better dialogue than we as public agencies members just trying to create reasons why there's or create explanations why the costs are so high. So I don't know how to formalize that, but maybe that's one of the things that we can talk about.
And for the, in your copy, pages 17 through 21 of the main report have the home ownership statistics that I was mentioning.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So I just wanted to add, if I may, as a coda, it should have been a prelude, which was to thank Ben and his staff for this report, because it is an incredible resource, and as a regional advocate, the data in here and the level of analysis is really useful in our advocacy work and very easy to share with the public. So thank you very much for the work that was done.
And as a final comment, to stress how much we're going to be working with HCD on this, is that statutorily, CalHFA's lending programs are to be consistent with the statewide housing plan. And this statewide housing assessment is like the prelude to the statewide housing plan. And so we want to make sure that whatever programs that we're developing and what it is that we're doing from a policy perspective are consistent with those.
Follow-up question on that. What is the timing then for that plan? Is that the assessment process is expected to finish this summer?
We're hoping the summer of this year.
And then the plan for that?
I have a, did you have a question? Okay. I wanted to also add my thanks and appreciation to everybody for putting this together. And I'm really delighted that to find that the permanent source of housing has made it finally up to this level. Some of us, Jonathan and I, certainly have been working on this for many, many, many years. But the place where it always seems to bog down is on what that source is. And I was wondering how you're going to go about, if you either have an idea of where it is or how you can go about determining what it is.
Well, I think the governor's message right now is that the legislature is asking the governor, he's committing to the legislature to work with them on a housing package. I think the reality is that the legislature is already beginning to work on that. We see bills both in the Senate and in the Assembly that have identified possible revenue sources. I think the challenge is obviously figuring out a solution here that gets the necessary 2/3 vote that you'll need to get in both chambers to be able to bring it to the governor's desk. So at this point, I think our role is to provide consistency and to be helpful, but I think this is a political question that the legislature is going to have to wrestle with.
Any other questions? I want to thank you again for a wonderful presentation and the thoroughness of this report. And we look forward as an agency working with you and continuing on this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we'll move now to item number 5, which is an update on the HUD Section 811 program. So, Mr. Shurdich and Ms. Louie.
Good morning, Board. Thank you for having us up here today. We wanted to follow up on a report that we submitted, I think in the middle of last year, on our HUD Section 811 Project Rental Assistance Program that CalHFA administers for the state. I know Tia also had asked me to talk a little bit about our partnership that we're working on developing with the City of LA. What we're looking to do is certain localities have some short-term acquisition funds that they're looking to better utilize and tie to some of their new gap financing funds that they've created through different local measures. And we know that our competitive strength in the marketplace on the multifamily side is our permanent lending. And so we're trying to partner with the City of LA to allow them to do some acquisition financing, to combine some of our gap financing funds, and to have us do the permanent financing on some, I think the initial focus may be on some naturally occurring affordable housing, so placing some restrictions and some permanent, making some existing affordable housing permanently affordable, or at least for a very long period of time. But we're also working through some, possibly doing on tax credit type deals as well. So we're still in discussions, but it's very promising. The city is very excited, and as are we, about moving forward on something like this and using this as a model for working with other cities around the state who, as was mentioned, have in some places more gap financing available than we may at the state level. So that's a quick overview. As we work through it, we will continue to update you on the progress of that. Now I'm going to turn it over to Janet Louie, who is somewhat new as our asset management chief, one of our asset management chiefs at the agency, to present information on the HUD Section 811 program.
Good morning. Like I said, I'm Janet Louie, the chief from the Asset Management Division, and I wanted to give you an overview of our Section 811 program today. This program was authorized by the Frank Melville Supportive Housing Act of 2010. It provides project-based section rental system programs to state housing agencies, directly working in partnership with the State Health and Human Services Department. The 811 program serves people with extremely low income, aged 18 to 61, with disabilities, by subsidizing their rents and providing long-term supportive services to the tenant. Under this program, no more than 25% of the units of the Section 8 property can be set aside for people with disability or have an occupancy preference for people with disability. CalHFA was awarded nearly $24 million from HUD in 2 rounds of funding for the Section 811 program. Under round 1, on February of 2013, HUD awarded over $11.2 million in rental subsidy and additional $931,000 in program administrative costs to create the program for approximately 241 811 units throughout the state for adults with disability. The cooperative agreement was signed by HUD in October of 2014, and the state's notice of funding availability was issued August of 2014. The first rental system contract was signed by by Garden Village Apartment located in Sacramento, and we were the first in the state to actually execute a rental assistance contract. The first 811 tenant moved into the apartment complex on March of 2015, and under this round one corporate agreement, the 811 units must be occupied by August of 2019, and the funds have to be dispersed by September 30th of 2025. Under round two, HUD awarded in May of 2014 over $11 million in rental subsidy and an additional $887,000 of administrative costs to create approximately 283 811 units. In this round, the PRA funds was targeted for Los Angeles County. The target population was also expanded to serve people who are homeless or have serious mental illness and were in need of rental subsidy and supportive services. The cooperative agreement was executed by HUD in February of 2016, and the state NOFA was issued also in February of 2016. Under this round, the 811 units have to be occupied by November of 2020, and the funds need to be dispersed by September of 2026. We partnered with 4 other state agencies in an interagency agreement. CalHFA serves as the grantee for this program, and our mission is to develop, execute, and administer the rental assistance contract and the use agreements with the property. We also obtain the PRA funds from HUD and ensure that the rental payments are paid on a monthly basis to the owners. The asset management staff is also in charge of reviewing all of the monthly tenant data that is supplied by the property, and also the annual site inspections of these properties. Our other partners in this is HCD. They played a large role in the development of the 811 program at the beginning, and also the round 1 and round 2 funding applications to HUD. HCD staff also developed the state NOFA under this program and review the applications that come in from the owner. Along with staff from the Department of Healthcare Services, HCD performs much of the marketing and outreach for this program. Tax Credit is also one of our partners, and they assist in reviewing the 811 application and the funding calculation. Our Health and Human Services partner is Department of Healthcare Services. They oversee the implementation of the program by serving people who are leaving the institutions with the referrals, the placement and ongoing services, and they verify that these are Medi-Cal eligible tenants. They also develop and maintain the wait list, and they're the single point of contact for the owners in the tenant referral organization. Our other partner is also Department of Developmental Services, who have a statewide oversight and coordination of outreach and referral to individuals with developmental disability, and they also market the program. So along with Department of Healthcare Services, the DDS staff, and HCD all do the outreach and marketing for this particular program. The entire team does meet twice a month, and evaluate the 811 applications that are submitted, and also make the final determination of awarding an 811 to the property. The target population that this program serves are for individuals that are disabled between the ages of 18 to 61 at the time of move-in who are extremely low income. They must be enrolled in or eligible for services under the Medi-Cal waiver administered by Department of Healthcare Services or Department of Developmental Services. They must be enrolled in an eligible Medi-Cal waiver administered by the departments, and priority is given to individuals residing in an inpatient facility for at least 90 days, where at least Medi-Cal has paid for one of these days. And they are enrolled in also the California Community Transition Program with Department of Healthcare Services. The inpatient facility could include, but is not limited to, a skilled nursing facility, a developmental center, an intermediate care facility, or individuals currently receiving Medi-Cal under their Long Care Waiver Act who are at risk of placement of an inpatient facility due to a loss of housing. All tenants receiving 811 assistance will be receiving long-term services and support paid for by Medi-Cal. Under round 2, the target population was expanded to include homeless person under section 1 of the HUD definition and or at risk of placement into an institution whose primary diagnosis is mental illness and developmental disability. Owners applying for the 811 rentals assistance are required to partner with one or more local tenant referral organizations to ensure that the residents are connected to the health and supportive services that they need. They can partner with a current California Community Transition Program provider or an organization willing to become a CCT provider, or a regional center if they contract with the Department of Developmental Services to provide services to individuals with developmental disabilities. And I want to give you a little bit of an update of what's been going on recently. There has been some recent changes to the program. Under round 1, the contract for the rent was set at 50% of the area median income. However, this lower contract rent prevented the program from attracting a large number of properties that are interested in the program. To date, we have committed roughly 1/3 of our available funds. Most of the properties who serve extremely low income are looking for Section 8 subsidies or other rental subsidies from HUD or localities. So it was really difficult to market this particular program. HUD acknowledged this difficulty, and they did provide a waiver to increase the rents from 50% of AMI to the fair market rents. So we issued an amendment to our state NOFA at the end of December, and we've had an increase of interest for this program. However, under round 2, it was a little bit different because round 1 was considered a demonstration program, and round 2 was not considered a demonstration program. So there wasn't as much flexibility of changing the rents to FMR. So HUD has to get approval from OMB to have a waiver for their particular NOFA to increase that rent. And we're hoping to get an update from HUD hopefully within the month to see if we can increase those rents to FMR levels. As I mentioned also, we are looking also into the possibility of expanding for round 2 because it was targeted toward Los Angeles County to expand that to statewide. Because we did find that the majority of the properties that were interested were outside of Los Angeles County. So when we get the decision from HUD to hopefully increase the rents to FMR, we will probably be expanding round 2 to statewide to reach more developers at that time. From the chart here, we can see that we have 5 developments that are currently under rent up. With these, we have 88 dedicated PRA units, and 51 of them are actually filled with 811 tenants. The remaining units actually have residents currently residing in the units. When they do become vacant, they will be filled with 811 tenants at the time. Also, we have 2 developments with pending rent up, and I was just informed today that both Owendale Mutual Housing has 2 811 tenants that moved in at the end of December, and Acacia should have 1 tenant moving in January. And we have 2 properties that are under construction, and which is hopefully to be rented up at the end of 2017 and 2018. So we have a total of 9 developments that we have made award to. This represents 113 811 units, which is 46% of our goal of the 241 units that we had projected. While we only used $3.8 million of our $11.2 million that was allocated to us, this represents 34% of the funds. We feel that with the increase of the FMR, we will still have enough money available to meet our goals of our 241 units. So I think we're on track to hopefully meet that goal. So I thank you for your time, and if there's any questions that I can answer, I'll be happy to do that.
I have a couple questions. First of all, the requirement that the owner has to partner with California Community Transitions Program. My understanding is that that program is primarily targeted for people with developmental disabilities.
They could partner with one of two. It's called a tenant referral organization, so they can partner with a CCT or a developmental center. So it's one of those two choices that they would have under the round one. Under round two, because originally we were targeting LA, they were going to use the coordinated entry system and they would not have to partner.
And then the other question I had was on the 25, the limit on 25% of units in a project. Is that 25% can be Section 811 or 25%, no more than 25% can be designated for people with disability?
No more than 25% could be designated for people with disability.
So tall? Of the 1.7 in administrative costs, are those costs shared with all 4 departments?
Currently, no, it's not. When the interagency agreement was created, it was decided at that time that because CalHFA was considered the grantee would do the administrative, that it would just go toward CalHFA. There has been some discussions about maybe sharing the cost later, but currently CalHFA is the only one receiving the cost.
And that's not an annual amount, that's just a total?
It's a total
and
for
it's
the
spread.
5 years.
But-
This is a 5-year program.
Okay, so it gets paid when we issue the grant funds?
We actually request it on a quarterly basis.
Oh, okay. Great. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Russell.
I'll remember to start off by thanking you for the report. Because this is really, this is almost a year now on the board here, and I continue to be astonished by the depth and breadth of the programs that CalHFA administers. And so I appreciate also that staff always comes forward with a deep knowledge of an understanding and analysis. I guess one question I have, is there a particular significance to the timing of this report today, or is this just an appropriate, a good time?
I think it's just something we wanted to update everyone, the board on.
Well, and then the last question is, are there challenges other than the FMR? Are there other constraints that you're experiencing, whether in marketing this program? Or do you feel like you're you're on the glide path to achieving the targets, or are there obstacles that we should be aware of or could assist with?
I think in discussion with other states, we all have the same challenges. One is the 25% rules of living that, because a lot of the other programs, there are disabilities already, so to try to just limit it to 25% is one of our challenges that we have. Another one is originally was the rent. At 50% of AMR, it was hard to attract the properties that were interested in, but we're hoping that with the increase of the FMR, that would make this program a little bit more viable for everyone.
And that was advertised in the December NOFA just this past month.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. The occupancy deadline for these in particular, where I mentioned that they have to be occupied either by 2019 or 2020, is also because to be able to do that, it kind of, all of the new construction, it's difficult to be able to build and get tenants filled by those particular dates. So we're looking more at existing properties to do that. And as you had mentioned, the administrative fee is an issue that we have come up recently because, as you know, there's a limited amount of staff in each of the departments that are working on the 811 program. And with so many other programs, their time on the 811 is being pulled away. So we are looking at maybe to be able to share some of that cost.
Is that something you can do administratively, or does it require participation here?
We're looking into that now.
Into that to see.
Very good. Thank you.
Ms. Gill. Yeah, a question. One of the startling data points in the prior report was about the concentration of homelessness in LA County. And then, so when I was reading about the geographic focus, that made some sense here. And it's curious that the reception has been challenging in LA.
We really haven't had a lot of interest, unfortunately, in the LA area. We have actually 2 applications that we supposedly, when it's been submitted, partial. He's trying to get that application to make sure that everything is complete before he submits the second one. But we're not having a lot of success in trying to attract those in Los Angeles right now.
Any reasons that come to mind?
I think part of the difficulty is that it only allows you to have 50% of the fair market rents. So it's a rental subsidy that will subsidize at 50% fair market rent. So you almost have to have an existing unit that's regulated at 30% AMI for this to be beneficial. So the pool in which you can target with these funds who would be attracted to these is a very limited pool. And so that's why we sought some of the waivers to increase the fair market rents to increase the rental subsidy to a fair market rent so that we could attract a larger pool of folks. And I think too, there has been an issue with the marketing and how do you get that marketing, and since they're coming either in through the coordinated entry system or through Department of Healthcare Services or other folks, marketing may not be a priority for them when they're not really receiving any of the admin fee.
Right.
And so to be able to, that's why we've been having some of these discussions. How can we work with our partners to make sure that we're targeting to the areas in which we need, knowing that that's a limited pool, knowing that they have some staffing issues. And so it just makes it very difficult because it wasn't a whole lot of money. And so you think about the amount of money that it takes and the amount of work that we're having to do to get these funds out on the street, and then you add, it's almost like marketing on your own dime. And so that's been some of the challenges.
Yeah, just to pick up on that, I do think one of the challenges that we have to continue to grapple with is on getting uptake. And either the waivers, I think, are helpful. The other place that the teams have begun to have conversations with is with the TCAP, just to try and think about whether there are ways to further incentivize new tax credit projects to sort of voluntarily take on some of these units at the moment that they're competing for the tax credits. And I think there are some the special needs set aside, for example, in the 9% program right now, incentivizes projects that have at least 50% of their units reserved for special needs. Well, that doesn't work with this program because you have a 25% cutoff. So I think Mark Stivers and others are engaged and working on this. I think there were a couple of tweaks in the last round that were helpful here, but I'm hopeful that we can continue to have it. We need to have a conversation there with the Treasurer's Office to continue to make sure that those funds are working. I mean, I will put out there that I think we do need to keep an eye on the clock, and although 2019 and 2020 seem far away in terms of getting all these units occupied, that'll be right on top of us in no time at all. And I think we need to make sure, especially if we're looking at new units, that we are hustling right now to make that happen. And then, the last observation I'll make here is I think there's also some liability for us to think about as we look at the new administration in Washington and cost controls. We do have some out-year exposure here because I believe that the rental assistance is a 5-year rental assistance contract.
It is a 5 years.
And so we are under the expectation that the Congress will appropriate and the administration will sign, a budget bill in whatever the math would be, as our first project is coming up, 2021 or 2022. That would provide another chunk of money for California to continue to renew these contracts. And I expect that we're going to have to be our own advocates here, just in Washington, to make sure that not having a lot of runway, make sure we're watching the clock when those funds run out so we can make sure our elected representatives in Congress are all that kind of stuff. Let's not lose sight of that. And then lastly, I would just say for the benefit of the board, I had the chance to go out, as some of you know, to the grand opening for Garden Village. Actually, when I had my HUD hat on before I came over to work for the state, and had the chance to spend a couple hours just meeting some of the incoming residents through this program, touring the properties, and it was really one of the most moving experiences of my professional career. You had folks who had spent their entire adult lives living in institutional settings, who had really almost never contemplated that they were capable of moving into an independent living setting. And now we're living in a really beautiful, well-maintained, attractive, fully integrated community, which had been thoughtfully designed, everything from the unit and the furniture to the service package, to make sure that they can live as any other functioning adult might, despite the disabilities that they had spent their lives living with. So it's an incredible property, but incredible program. But no doubt about it, it's a huge amount of work to pull these pieces together. So hats off to you, Janet, and the team at CalHFA for doing all this great interagency work to make it come together as well as it has so far.
And Christina DiFrancesca at HCD has been a driver behind it.
Yep.
And a closing note, I think Janet said first in the state. We were actually first in the nation.
Yes.
So let's be clear about that. And when we look at California and compare to the other 811s across the nation, California is by far exceeding the expectation and ahead of everyone else in the nation when it comes to these 811 units and trying to make this collaboration work.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on now to closed session to do some employee evaluation. So we ask everyone except for the board to leave the room. So we'll call us back into open session again. Going to item number 7, which is a discussion of possible action to adjust the salary of the executive director. Mr. Dunning?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. The board met in closed session to do the evaluation of the executive director, Tia Boatman, and very pleased and would like to recommend a merit increase. And I guess we have a resolution there to do that.
Yes, and the committee is making a recommendation to the board that increase be 3%. So, there are any questions or comments, Mr. Russell?
Dan, move.
Well, let's see if there's any discussion that anybody wants to have. Okay, Mr. Russell, you can make a
So moved.
I'll second that 3% merit increase.
Okay, so there's a motion to approve Resolution 1703 with a 3% merit increase for the executive director. Can you call the roll, please?
Ms. Avila Farias?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Ms. Gallagher?
Yes.
Ms. Gunn?
Yes.
Mr. Gunny?
Yes.
Mr. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Metcalf?
Yes.
Ms. Sotelo?
Yes.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Ms. Fall?
Yes.
Resolution 1703 is passed.
Approved. Item number 8, which is discussion and possible action to adjust the salary of the director of multifamily programs. Mr. Gunny?
Yes. We also talked about this position as well and suggested that we have a 2.7% increase for the director.
This was based on a report from the executive director to us and her recommendation. So are there any questions or concerns about that?
I just wanted to comment, just wanted to comment that Tony has done a fantastic job, has really stepped in and performed and overperformed on expectations. So just wanted to personally say that and acknowledge that. And clearly under the guidance of Tia and all the great work that you do, Tia.
Mr. Chairman?
I would second that sentiment and move that the board adopt Resolution 17-04 with a 2.7% increase.
I'll second that.
Call the roll.
Ms. Avila Farias?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Ms. Gallagher?
Yes.
Ms. Gunn?
Yes.
Mr. Gunny?
Yes.
Mr. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Metcalf?
Yes.
Ms. Sotelo?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Ms. Fall?
Yes.
The resolution 1704 is approved.
Okay, item 9 is a discussion of a impossible action setting a general salary increase for key exempt management staff. Don, you'd like to make, I hope, we don't know that we need a presentation, we've had all
But
the...
if you would just do 30-second overview, we've seen the
Sure.
charts, the board's analyzed it. We're ready
Okay.
to go.
Great. Good morning, Chair Falk and members of the board. I'm Don Kavir, the agency's Chief Deputy Director. Agenda item 9 represents the Executive Evaluations Committee recommendation to the full board for approval of a general salary increase of 3% for CalHFA exempt staff, along with approval to amend the salary ranges of those positions by the amount of the general salary increase approved by the board. Additionally, the committee's recommendation allows for future adjustments to CalHFA exempt salaries and salary ranges in concert with CalHR's approved general salary increases for other state exempt employees. Because CalHFA board controls the salaries of CalHFA exempt employees, CalHR cannot authorize a general salary increase for CalHFA. As a result, CalHFA exempt employees have been excluded from nearly 14% in general salary increases authorized by CalHR between 2007 and 2016. I think that kind of puts it in context. The board memo, as well as the attachments, support kind of our position on this issue.
Awesome. Is there a motion or any comment?
Is there any discussion?
Well, I'll make a motion to adopt 1701.
Second.
Okay. Call the roll, please.
Ms. Avila Farias?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Ms. Gallagher?
Yes.
Ms. Gunn?
Yes.
Mr. Gunny?
Yes.
Mr. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Metcalf?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Ms. Sotelo?
Yes.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Ms. Fall?
Yes.
Resolution 1701 is approved.
And our next item is to talk about a contract with an outside advisor in assisting setting salary levels and ranges for the position of the new enterprise risk manager and review of the structure and level of agency compensation of key exempt staff.
The item before you, the evaluation committee charter requires that the committee review any proposed contract to engage consultants needed to carry out its duties under the charter. And the committee periodically is tasked with reviewing the compensation levels of key exempt salaries that are established through the board pursuant to Health and Safety Code 50909. The item before you seeks approval for the executive director to enter into a contract and finish negotiations for that contract with Willis Tower Watson to set the salary range and compensation for the new position of the Director of Enterprise Risk Management and Compliance, which was created during the last legislative session to replace our agency's Director of Mortgage Insurance. It's also to assist the committee in its periodic review of the compensation levels of key exempt staff.
Okay. Any questions or concerns about this?
Could I just add, I think it's important that we have a full complement of staff, that we support TIA in all efforts to obtain the positions that are needed, and I'll be pleased to support this.
Just want to add that when the executive evaluation committee met, that we did have a presentation from the person who's going to be conducting that study, and how that they can do it with just updating the previous one, so it saves us a lot of cost in that regard. We're not starting all over. Okay, can I motion to approve this?
I'll
Make a
move
motion.
approval.
Second.
Second?
Second.
Avila Farias?
Ms. Avila Farias? Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Ms. Gallagher?
Yes.
Ms. Gunn?
Yes.
Mr. Gunny?
Yes.
Mr. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Metcalf?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Ms. Sotelo?
Yes.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Ms. Fall?
Yes.
Resolution 1702 is approved.
Okay. Item 12 are various reports from staff, and we generally do not discuss these unless somebody has some questions or they're more for board information. Is there any questions or concerns?
Madam Chair, just a quick question back on the previous item agenda. Is the subcommittee going to go back and speak with Tia of our comments then? I just wasn't sure if that's how it's going to be. Okay. Make sure she doesn't go off on notice.
Okay, any questions on the reports? Okay. Any other board matters? I don't believe, can I say thank you? Absolutely.
I do want to thank the board for continuing to have confidence in me and our staff. I think we've worked very hard over the last year. Our primary goals looking ahead are to increase the agency's future income. I spoke to you all of that in my report. We're going to continue to improve operational efficiencies. We have significant vacancies in some of our key exempt. We have been working double time. I mean, literally double time when you look at some of our vacancies in our exempt staff. So one of our priorities will be the recruitment of those key exempt staff. Our top 3 priorities for recruitment will be the Director of Enterprise Risk, our Deputy Director or Assistant Director in Multifamily Programs, and a Director of Admin. And so we'll be looking for a recruitment to fill those top 3 positions because I think it's critical. As you know, the General Counsel did retire in December, and so our General Counsel has left. And so what we've done to fill his position is we have Assistant General Counsel Tom Freeberger, who's going to be overseeing operations. We have Acting Assistant General Counsel Claire, I can never pronounce Claire's last name.
Toriainen.
Claire, who will be the Assistant General Counsel for Single Family Programs, and Mark Victor, who is our Assistant General Counsel for Multifamily Programs and Asset Management. So that's how we're going to spread out those job duties of the General Counsel. We won't be filling that position immediately because I think we have the coverage, but we will be focusing on those other 3 recruitments. So, and I just wanted to really thank the board for their continued confidence in us.
Everyone, thank you. And you will get a full report later.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any public testimony? Item 13. Okay. In that case, we are adjourned. Thank you all. Thank you.